I think we had a really good, strong opening session speaker. We're going to follow that up with some good speakers for this first technical session. I want to get going because I'm sure this is something that everybody's interested in. I know I am. All questions will be at the end after the presenters have presented. I'm going to go ahead and get started and introduce our first presenter. Mr. Mark Smith is an experienced political and government professional. He graduated from Morehouse College in 2014 with a BA in sociology. He also served on Senator David Perdue's staff as the Metro Regional Director, developing and maintaining relationships with constituents, local businesses, government officials, and community organizations on behalf of the Senator. He also served as Senator Perdue's advisor and liaison to HBCUs in the state of Georgia. He joined Governor Kemp's administration as Deputy Director of Government Affairs to prepare for the 2022 legislative session. Afterwards, he joined the Georgia Department of Transportation as the Senior Planning Policy Coordinator, where he is the project manager on the state's National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. Mr. Mark Smith.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. Does this go on full screen? All right, perfect. So again, Mark Smith, responsible for the state's plan for the NEVI program, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, that was passed into law or signed into law on November 15, 2021 in a bipartisan infrastructure law. The state is required to submit a plan on August 1st. And in this plan, I will talk about some of the requirements that are necessary there, but we, preparing for the plan, we received the guidance on February 10th. And ever since then, on May 13th, we nominated two corridors or segments of these corridors, and that's US 441 and 82, and I'll explain what that means later here. Give you a quick overview of the program. Is Georgia is to receive approximately $135 million over 5 years. The first phase is to build out over 1,500 miles of alternative fuel corridors. Before we spend money elsewhere in the state on charging infrastructure, the Secretary has required that states fully build out their existing corridors that are nominated. Fully built out means that these charging stations are placed every 50 miles down the interstate and at least 1 mile off of the exit from the interstate, and there must be 4 ports that are CCS and DC fast chargers, and simultaneously each charging 150 kilowatts. Right now, Georgia currently has 11 compliant sites that meet the federal requirement for fully built out, and we have about 30 to 35 gap sites that it would be developed in the first year and a half. The cost of that is expected to be less than $50 million to fully build out our existing corridors and infrastructure, because Georgia is actually in a pretty good place. A lot of this work started in November 2020 and August 2021 with Governor Kemp's EMIA, Electric Mobility Innovation Alliance. So here on this map, you'll see really where the pink are there are 25 miles, but we still have to build those up to 50. The orange or yellowish are the gaps that we have to complete over the next 2 years. And you may not be able to see it, but there are black dots where all the cities are. So Valdosta, I think Forsyth, etc. But those are our fully compliant sites that put us ahead of the curve. Already talked about the funding of $135 million. This total was $5 billion from the national program. And this also includes an additional $2.5 billion for discretionary grant programs. We've yet to have guidance on that, but that is breaking into $1.25 billion for community chargers, and $1.25 billion for further charging on corridors. That also includes other alternative fuels and not just EV. Again, this plan that we are submitting on August 1st is considered a plan to plan. It is simply to unlock the federal money that is required. And so we plan to do this in line with the federal requirements. After we submit it August 1st, we expect to get approval or required changes by September 30th. And then that's when we move into updating the plan, the implementation and the operation size of it. But again, just want to note that this plan is a general plan to unlock the federal money. Key elements of the plan are going to include stakeholder engagement, equity benefits, and Justice 40, which is a new requirement from the federal government, workforce development, and infrastructure deployment. And what we're dealing with here, again, is evolving guidance. So we still have notice for proposed rulemakings that were released to us about a month ago, but those are not final. So we were submitting the plan on some components as if it is final, or highlighting that until it is final, then we will make adjustments. And again, waiting for guidance on the 2.5 grant program. Quick overview of our plan or our vision and our hopes for the plan. One, GDOT plans to be a niche investor in EV charging infrastructure. What we know is this is not going to fix our EV charging problem. What we do here will be helpful, and hopefully will help spur investment from the private side. So what we're looking at is prioritizing, especially our corridors on evacuation routes, and in rural areas and in places where the private sector will not go with these investments, and hopefully that spurs that. I'll also note that GDOT will not own, operate, or maintain these. We will enter into a P3 partnership, and right now that is all that we're working on currently with legal and the state budget office. So again, just overview our plans. We want to make sure that we are compliant with federal requirements, that this deployment is customer driven. Where are the customers? Where will the customers be? Economic development, which is these sites should optimize economic development where they are located. And then private sector ownership and operations. This also includes nonprofits. And then making sure that these charging stations are sustainable and reliable. One of the things that we don't want to happen is 5 years after the funding, something that GDOT is tied to, that there are abandoned stations and stations that were never used. So we want to make sure that they're sustainable, they're reliable, and that they will be used. As I mentioned, a huge component of this is stakeholder engagement. It is very important for the federal government. It's so important that after we submit this plan, which we have to highlight how we're going to do it, that we have to submit every year in ways that we have engaged with the community, the public, and key stakeholders. Right now, we've already consulted with 42 entities. We've had 65 of these stakeholder meetings and interviews with 42 of those. Most of them have come from the private business, which will help us find the potential site hosts and vendors. Next would have been the equity community, and this is how do we make sure that benefits, when we talk about Justice 40, is represented in underrepresented communities. Another note I'll make on that, which towards the end, is one of the new things that we're dealing with is Justice 40. What it doesn't mean, as we have met with many equity groups, is they think that we'll just drop, 40% of chargers in communities that can't afford to have them. That's not what that means. It just means 40% of the benefits. So if it's workforce development, workforce training, et cetera, has to pass through some of these disadvantaged communities, and I have a map later to show that. It requires us to work with our utility companies. Proud to say that Georgia is the only state that actually hosted all of our major utility companies in one room in a working group session. So that has been very helpful for us and our partners, especially to understand our grid power availability, capacity, water strategies as we approach ownership and make readies and our rates moving forward. Some of those initial findings that we found for utilities have been, of course, our services, our areas are balkanized, and that the precise site locations are going to be required to provide cost estimates. That is a unique challenge that we're facing because the plan does not require us to list the exact sites, but at the same time, we want to know where can utilities host these and provide the power, but the utilities cannot give us that unless we give them the exact site location. So what we've done is hired a consultant team with sub-consultants, and that is EY, along with sub-consultants HNTB and JLL. JLL is helping us on where to find these site locations that are optimal for the state, constituents, and utilities. And then HNTB have been great resources of electrification experts. And then lastly, on this equity piece, another huge component for the federal government here is looking at the imbalances between rural and urban areas, race, ethnicity, ability, and income. So again, like I said, one of the things that we are looking for doing is going where the private market is not going. So that's where the rural component comes in. Luckily, the private sector is thriving in the metro Atlanta area. We don't want to abandon that, but we have been working with them on some of the priorities there where we can be helpful, but where they also can be helpful. This equity looks like the benefits on air quality to, how do we build up EVs for multifamily housing, the resilience of our energy grid, and minority-owned business participation, which we are meeting with a lot of these equitable groups that are trying to help us understand how we don't just drop chargers into communities that don't have them, but the importance of putting them there to drive the demand for it. And then also, the federal government recently released the Clean Bus program. So we're looking at school buses, transit buses, and mobility options for low-wealth families, and how this electrification will be helpful. And that is a quick overview of where Georgia is, our responsibility, what we plan to accomplish over the next 5 years. We plan to submit our plan to the Joint Program Office on, I think, July 27th. Once that is approved, we will release it to the public for comments. And again, it's a reminder that it is a plan to plan, mostly because I think the federal government thought this would be easier to implement than not. And then they've come back and said, let's just make this overall plan to help us with the next 5 years. And I think we'll do questions after. So thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker will be Miss Laura Rogers. She's the Deputy Director at the RAY. Prior to joining the RAY, Laura was an Environmental Program Manager at the Maryland Department of Transportation for 6 years. She led the environmental stewardship, sustainability, and energy policies and programs across all MDOT transportation business units, including highways, tolls, ports, airports, transit, and motor vehicles. In addition, she oversaw and coordinated environmental management activities in transportation planning, design, construction, operations, and maintenance. Before joining MDOT, Laura worked in the federal and private sectors on environmental management and sustainability issues. She spent 2 years at the Department of the Army at Arlington National Cemetery, where she developed their environmental programs. 4 years with a private environmental consulting firm working on multimedia environmental compliance and management programs around the U.S. and Europe, and 2 years as an air quality enforcement officer with the Maricopa County in Arizona. She received her BS in Justice Studies from Arizona State University. Laura Rogers.
Thank you. So today I'm going to be talking about emerging technologies and strategies in charging infrastructure. So just to give a little bit of background about the RAY and who we are, it's really important to understand a little bit more about our DNA. So the RAY is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. And we also work in a formal chartered relationship with GDOT and FHWA on an 18-mile stretch of highway in West Georgia on I-85. So this 18-mile stretch of highway is special because it is dedicated to the late Ray C. Anderson, and it extends from the Georgia-Alabama line on I-85 up to exit 18 in LaGrange, Georgia, where Ray C. Anderson built a interface carpet tile company. And Ray was considered the greenest CEO of the century by Forbes. He, challenged his company to go zero in zero carbon, zero waste, and to use more renewable energy. And so when he passed away and the Georgia legislature dedicated this stretch of highway in his honor, his youngest daughter, Harriet Anderson Langford, decided that she wanted to create a memorial in his honor that really reflects what he did with his life. And so that's how the RAY, the nonprofit, was born, to try and try and push net zero transportation, just like Ray C. Anderson did in the industrial world. And so that is, basically what we have done with this 18-mile stretch in partnership with GDOT and FHWA is to, turn this into a living laboratory in a real working environment to try and achieve net zero transportation. So our mission is similar: zero carbon, zero waste, and zero deaths. So the safety aspect of it, because if nobody goes home, right, at the end of the day, then what is it all for? And so this is just an overview of what the highway currently looks like, and you can see that, we work in all kinds of, media. So we have a right-of-way solar, we have rubberized asphalt, we do a lot of work in connected vehicle infrastructure. At the visitor center, we have a tire safety check station, on and on. But today, we are going to be mostly talking about the energy and transportation nexus. And so, after we've built out this corridor, and we continue to build out these innovative projects along this corridor, we have actually expanded our reach to other states across the country. So we are now working with about 36 different transportation agencies in about 24 states, helping them to do similar projects as what we've been able to accomplish in Georgia. And so, you can see that we're kind of smattered across the country, and we work with transportation agencies, kind of up and down, whether it's the feds, State Department of Transportation, counties, MPOs, cities, all of the above. So here's a picture of the EV charging station that we have at the visitor center. And you can see that it is supported by a solar array. Now, we started this project, we put in, this was the first project on the Ray that we did. It was a 50 kW charging station in 2015, and in 2020 we upgraded it to 175 kW. Now, what's great about this charging station is that we can actually add one more module onto this ABB charger and quickly scale it up to 350 kW. So this is important because right now most vehicles cannot accept a 350 kW charge. But very soon they will be. And so building this kind of infrastructure allows us to future-proof this new EV charging station. And then this solar array is actually connected, this is grid tied, as well as the EV charging station, but it helps offset some of the energy that is used by this EV charging station. This is a picture of the 1 megawatt solar array that is at exit 14 on the Ray Highway. It has pollinator habitat underneath it, and you can see that it is safely set back from the travel lanes behind safety barrier. And it takes up, just one quadrant of the interchange. And so, this really got us thinking about how can we utilize the right-of-way to help build more renewable energy that can help support EV charging stations like the one we have at the Visitor Center. And so we partnered with Esri to try and help us find out just how much transportation right-of-way can potentially be used to install solar in the right-of-way. And so, as most of you are probably aware, Esri is, the leader in GIS, across the world. And most DOTs have their right-of-way parcel data sets, street center lines, in Esri data layers. And so Esri configured and gifted this right-of-way solar analysis tool to the Ray to help us determine where the best places are to install solar and for EV charging. So we start by using the DOT's actual data sets. So we take the parcels, we take the street center lines, we apply inclusion and exclusion criteria. We apply, a certain safety setback. So on average, we apply 40 feet, but we can adjust that. And then we put all of that information in. We take out, threatened and endangered species, floodplains, whatever it is that you as, the DOT want to include in the inclusion and exclusion criteria. And what's left over is we have the potential areas that we can look further into that meet those different criteria. And then once we have that overall view, we can then apply advanced 3D modeling, which includes digital elevation models, digital surface models, and we can combine those two to get a realistic view of what the land actually looks like. And then we can overlay it with solar radiation. So red is really high solar radiation. Those are going to be the best places. And then after that, we can actually use the point cloud in the Esri ArcGIS Pro tool, and we can take a closer look at the right-of-way. And so this picture shows the suitability model that was developed by Esri. It favors the high solar radiation value, followed by the south and western facing slope aspects, and then also a low to moderate slope, so we can get ease of access for installation and maintenance of the solar arrays. And then green, you can see, is the most suitable for solar specifically. And then we can dive deeper, and we can actually build digital twins within ArcGIS Pro on that land, so you can see what it actually looks like, and you can move around digitally. And then we can take this a step further. So after we, build the digital twin, we can go into it, and we can actually do things like a viewshed analysis. So at the top of this hill where we built this solar array in the digital model is a scenic overlook. And so you can see that all of the areas in pink are actually not visible to the viewer when we put a viewer at the top of that hill. And so this allows us in the very early pre-planning stages, before we even have to go out on site, to actually adjust the arrays and take off those first few layers of solar panels so that we don't block the visitor's view. And then this is what the array will look like after we take away those top panels to preserve the view. And so this is a really powerful tool that we have already rolled out with our partners across the US. And this is something that we are continuing to expand with Esri. So we are using this same configure tool, and we are going to apply it to, other alternative uses in the right-of-way, such as fiber. So where are the best places to locate fiber based on inclusion, exclusion criteria and what the land looks like? Transmission or other energy infrastructure. And then also EV charging stations. And we can overlay some of those best locations for EV charging and see where potentially we can also install solar and connect the two to provide renewable energy for the EV charging stations. And it also provides an added layer of resilience during extreme weather events. And then what else can we do with all of that renewable energy? So not just wired EV charging, but we can actually install wireless EV charging. So this is a video from the Aspire Center out of Utah State University. And we are actually working with the Aspire Center on multiple pilot projects for actually installing this wireless technology. So the Central Florida Expressway is onboarding a project in Q1 of 2023 that will use the similar type of, the same type of technology with the loops, the charging loops in the ground. The Michigan DOT project, which folks may have heard about, they awarded it to Electrion just this year. Similar type of technology with the loops in the ground. And then Indiana DOT and Aspire are working with Purdue University in a different type of technology where they actually magnetize the concrete itself. So that project is going to be starting in the lab, and then hopefully will be a project in the ground once they prove out the technology in the lab. All right, and then another big question that is on our mind at the Ray is where exactly should we be putting all of these EV charging stations, especially when we consider medium and heavy duty vehicles, because that infrastructure is a lot different, has a lot different needs than passenger vehicle EV charging. So we worked with Geotab to take a look at how trucks are actually moving across the country. So Geotab is a telematics provider. They have their telematics in about 2.5 million medium and heavy duty vehicles across the country. And so we started with 2 pilot corridors. One was I-20 from Dallas to Atlanta, so the long haul freight corridor. And then the other corridor was from the Port of Savannah to the inland port of Atlanta, so the shorter haul. And what we were looking at are, where the vehicles are stopping, how long they're stopping, where are they starting, where are they stopping, how long they're moving, so that we could get a really good idea about how the vehicles are moving, so we can meet them, put the infrastructure and meet them where they are, rather than expect the vehicles to go, off and try and find charging. And so here are some of the results, and I know it's a little bit small. I have a couple of close-ups, but you can see that the yellow is the long haul corridor, and then the orange is the shorter regional. Let's zoom into the long haul. So you can see with this one, the vehicles are stopping pretty regularly across the whole route. But for the shorter one, there's actually really only 3 spots where they're stopping. And so this information we think is valuable because now we can start overlaying this with some of the other data, like the solar arrays, like the other data that you're going to be pulling together for under the NEVI program. And so, you know, as we start electrifying medium and heavy duty vehicles, we can actually see where they are and try and meet them exactly where they are, so that when we're building these megawatt chargers, which are very expensive, are going to require a lot of power, we can ensure that we are not building bridges to nowhere, right? That would be horrible, especially with that much money that has to go into electrifying these kind of vehicles. All right, and that is all I have.
Okay, now for our last speaker this session. This is Mr. Glenn Halliday. Glenn has been with Georgia Power for 24 years, holding various positions focused on delivering customer solutions. Glenn is currently the Electric Transportation Program Manager, focusing on helping Georgia Power business customers successfully meet the growing demand of the EV marketplace through installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure and fleet transition. His previous responsibilities include new business and product development and account management, serving Georgia Power's largest commercial and industrial customers. Mr. Glenn Halliday.
Good. All right. Good morning. It's always tough to be the person between you guys and lunch, right? So we'll see if we can get you guys through this. Again, as Scott said, I'm Glenn Halliday. I'm with Georgia Power Company, and I am the manager of one of our electric vehicle programs that we have out there, called our Make Ready program. And my goal today is to just kind of walk you through sort of a market introduction, right? What in the world is going on in the EV world right now that has everybody going, wow, this thing's really growing? Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of data to kind of show you what's going on with the market. And then I'm going to talk about specifically some of the things that Georgia Power are doing in this market. But before I do, I'm going to basically give you an electric vehicle charging 101 for those of you who don't know it. So basically, because I get asked this question a lot, right? So basically, there's 3 levels of charging. One is a level 1 charger, right? That is basically taking an extension cord and plugging it into your car. You typically get about 4 miles per hour per charge on that extension cord being plugged into your car. Typically not what anybody wants to do. The second type of charger, and probably the most common one you're going to find, is called a level 2 charger. Those typically get around 25, 26 miles per hour on the charge. So what you'll see is a lot of residential customers, when they buy an electric vehicle, they will put this type of charger in their house. That way they can wake up every morning with a full tank of gas, if you will. The third type of charger is typically what you're going to find. I don't know what happened there. There we go. The third type of charger that you're going to find is a DC fast charger, right? It's 480 volt, and something keeps happening. I assume y'all see that. Okay, y'all aren't seeing that. So there's a 480 volt charger. It's a DC fast charger, and sorry, something keeps popping up on the screen of the computer. So, but I'll look over here. 480 volt charger, and typically they come in different sizes. They can be 60 kW, 100 kW, and as Mark talked about, 150 kW chargers that are going to be out there. And that's what GDOT is going to use for their locations, is they're going to put in 450 kW chargers. Typically, if you have a 150 kW charger, you're going to get a full charge in roughly 15 minutes. Okay, so that's how those chargers will work. From that standpoint, and those are going to be the ones that you really need along those corridors to charge. A lot of fleet customers will look at putting in those bigger chargers as well. The other part of the chargers is there's something called a networked and a non-networked charger. right? So if you're gonna be charged, if you have to pay to use that charger, it's going to be networked. It's gotta have some sort of software in it and communications that can happen. But there are some that are called dummy chargers, right? Those dummy chargers, they have no data, no telematics, no way to pay. You simply pick it up and plug it in, and that's it, right? So that's typically what you're gonna get at your home. Those are usually gonna cost, the way the market is right now, who knows? But I would say somewhere around $700 to $1,000 to get a charger like that. But you're gonna end up on the DC fast charger, those are gonna cost anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 typically. That didn't work. All right, let's see if that'll work. You're good. All right, I can't figure this out. How does this thing work? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So let's talk about the market and what's going on in the market. We've all watched the Super Bowl, right? You get all these ads about all these different types of electric vehicles that are coming. And so you keep hearing about it. Now, I tell people that I have been with Georgia Power for 24 years. And the day I started with Georgia Power, we have always had an electric vehicle group, and it's always been 5 years away. So when I started in 98, I guess it was, man, in 5 years, man, electric vehicles are going to be everywhere. And then 2005, but in 5 years, 2015, but in 5 years, 2020, man, in 5 years, something feels different this time, right? You're starting to see manufacturers are committed to it. And I'm going to show you real quick on the next one is just look at the number of vehicle models that are out there. 1996, there was basically one model that was out there. Okay. And I actually got to drive one of those little EV ones when I first started with the company. So that was kind of cool. But in 2022, there's over 50 models now. But by 2024, there'll be over 130 models of electric vehicles that are in the market. Okay. So what that tells me is the 5 years that I've been waiting on for 24 years is finally here. It's going to come. So how does this impact Georgia, right? So just thinking about it from a Georgia perspective, there's a lot of new companies, and when you see the EV market growing like it is, there's a lot of pop-up businesses that come with it, right? A lot of economic development comes with it. So you're starting to see new companies come to Georgia. You're starting to see companies like Home Depot start talking about their sustainability goals. You're starting to see cities talk about being 100% clean energy. So a lot of things are happening that are really starting to drive this market. We've already talked about the infrastructure bill, so I won't hit on that. And I will say from just a Georgia perspective, Georgia is one of the top 10 markets in the nation right now for EV. It's been a really good economic development tool for us as a state. But again, that just gives you that 5 years is really, really going to be here now. So just talking about Georgia right now from an EV sales standpoint, Georgia was 14th in the nation from an EV sales standpoint. In 2020, Georgia was 16th, and we sold 5,400 vehicles. But in 2021, we sold 13,000 of all new car sales were EVs, right? So you saw over 100% increase in EV sales. And I can tell you what you're starting to see in 2022, and this is just showing you where the EV market is. Obviously, Atlanta is kind of dominating that part of it, which makes sense because that's where the people are. But in 2021, it was 4.3%, right? So in 2021, the national EV share of cars that were being sold was 4.3%. And in Georgia, it was 2.9. First quarter of 2022, nationally, it was 6.2. In Georgia, 4.7% of all cars that were sold were EVs. So what you're seeing is EVs are starting to grow, become more common for consumers to purchase from that standpoint. And you're starting to see it really happen. So with all those vehicles on the road, what are we going to need? We're going to need more charging stations. Nationally, it's projected that from a DC fast charger standpoint, we're going to need over almost 28,000 chargers nationally. And right now we've got about 13,000, right? And this is by 2030. The level 2 chargers were about 530,000 short, right? So thinking about that in those terms, it's all the materials, the chargers and everything that comes with it, all of the infrastructure, all this has to go in the ground by 2030 if we're going to be successful. So let's talk specifically about Georgia, right? Georgia Power and what we do as far as helping customers get infrastructure and chargers in the ground. It really comes in, I'll say 4 areas. One is home charging, right? So we've got to be able to support those customers who buy electric vehicles and put chargers in their houses, right? And that can be an issue that are going to be converting their fleet of vehicles over to electric, whether it's an HVAC dealer, a municipality, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of fleet vehicles out there that are going to need charging. And then it becomes the public charging, right? If you're traveling from Atlanta to St. Simons, and you are going to have to stop somewhere along the road to be able to charge. And so having that public charging available, and again, Georgia Power's role is making sure all of these chargers have power going to them. I already mentioned Georgia was top 10 in public charging. Georgia has 3,600 chargers statewide that are public, but by 2030, it's projected that we'll need 18,000. So we are over 14,000 chargers short that we're going to need by 2030. So how do we get those in the ground, right? That's going to be a big key. Obviously, working with my panel cohorts up here, Mark and Laura, we're going to have their help. The GDOT, the NEVI dollars, they're not going to get all that infrastructure in the ground, right? It's going to basically get us maybe 10, 15% tops of the chargers that we need. So there's going to be a need for a lot of public-private partnerships to get all those chargers in the ground from a public standpoint. And then the one thing that I get asked a lot is about the grid, right? Is the grid going to be able to handle that? And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So our role from an electric transportation standpoint is we want to provide energy solutions to our customers, and we want to remove the barriers to adopting electric transportation, right? We want to make sure it's easy for them to be able to put chargers in and help them decarbonize their businesses and meet their cost-saving goals as well. The other thing that we want to do is a lot of people think about charging as just passenger vehicles. And it's more than that, right? There's businesses with forklifts out there. There's seaports down here that have cranes and yard tractors, and it's short haul trucks for delivery standpoint. It's airport equipment. All these things are used in business. One of the products that we've worked with is something called eTrue, and it's truck refrigeration. It's getting those trucks that sit there and idle diesel all day to keep their product cool in the back of their trucks. When they're plugged in, we can plug them in and have them just cool their trucks on electric so that they're not idling diesel all day. And so there's a lot of different things that Georgia Power is involved in trying to help our customers convert to electric. So the things that Georgia Power does is we basically got a few different programs out there that we do right now. Our regulated programs, we have 2 of them that we do. The Public Service Commission gave us $24 million over 3 years in the 2019 rate case. Our community charging program got $6 million of that, and the Make Ready program got $18 million, and that's the program that I manage. And we'll talk about those in a little more detail. The other thing that we do is we do offer rebates to our customers. Residentially, we offer our customers a $250 rebate to buy a charger if they're going to put a charger in their house. And it's an instant rebate. If you go to the Georgia Power Marketplace, you can actually buy a charger online and get it that way. The other thing that we're doing is working with builders who are building new homes, and we'll pay them a $100 rebate to go ahead and install an EV-ready plug in the garage so that all a homeowner has to do is plug in when they get there and they don't have to have wires run and things of that nature. On the business side, we do offer a $500 rebate for a charger, and it's available to all Georgia Power customers, and it's typically 5 chargers or less. So if you just want to put in a couple, then that's the route for you, is to just get that $500 rebate. If it's more than 5 chargers, typically our Make Ready program is going to be better for you. So let's talk real quick about our community charging program. This is a program where Georgia Power owns and maintains the chargers. We've got 61 of them across the state. And really what we do is we do about 10 to 15 of these a year. And what we're trying to do here is look at those corridors across the state that need chargers, right? Because we want to make sure that we are EV corridor ready according to the Federal Highway Administration. So we'll typically look at the different corridors across the state so that you know that you can get from St. Simons to Trenton, Georgia, taking not just the main highways, but the other roads like 441 or whatever the case may be. We will look to put chargers strategically. We tend to partner with different companies. It might be a Chick-fil-A, a Dunkin' Donuts, a Waffle House. We'll partner with customers so that we can put the chargers at their locations so that when you go charge, you can actually charge your vehicle, go in, get something to eat, and by the time you're done eating, you've got a full charge and you're ready to go. So that's a program that we do, and we're very, when we talk about environmental and justice and equity and things of that nature, we're always looking at underserved communities with this program as well, because what we know is that there are some small towns where the public, the private charging companies aren't necessarily going to go, or they're only going to go where the vehicles are, right? And that's how it's going to go. Well, if you're going to get vehicles to come to a small town in South Georgia, you've got to have the infrastructure there. So we try to be very strategic in how we manage this program, looking for the right areas, the right towns to make sure that all communities are involved with this program. The program that I manage is our Make Ready program. And what we do there is it's open to all Georgia Power customers, and Georgia Power will basically own all the infrastructure up to the charger. So the customer has to buy the charger, but Georgia Power will actually come in and pay for and own all of that infrastructure up to the charger. So it'll be the panel, the wire. We'll make sure all the transformers are there. So we'll own everything, even behind the customer's meter, up to that charger. And so what that does is it saves the customer a significant amount in cost. The bulk, I would say 60 to 70% of, if you think about the charger and the infrastructure, I would say about 60 to 70% of the cost is made up in the infrastructure. So we're removing that barrier for our customers, and all they have to do is go out and buy the chargers. So it's an application program. You can go to our website, georgiapower.com/makeready, and you can actually apply for assistance and funding through that program. I will tell you the $18 million has been committed now, so we're on a wait list right now. It's been a very popular program, which you would imagine it would when you're trying to I don't want to say give money away, but you're trying to help people lower their cost. So it's been a very, very popular program. We're on a wait list now. We actually have filed for another rate case, as we're required to do every 3 years. And we have asked for more dollars for our Make Ready program to continue to help customers, because this is what's going to help us get to that 14,000 chargers that we're missing. This is going to be part of the solution from that standpoint. And I can tell you of all the jobs that we've done over the last year, they're not all in yet, but it'll be about 2,000 chargers that we're going to end up putting in the market through this program. Not all of them will be public, but I would say over half of them will be public and open to the public. So, so some good things going on there. So I think I've only got 1 or 2 slides left. I got this one and another one, and the other one's probably closing, so I'm getting close. So let's talk about infrastructure itself, right? One of the things that I always get asked is, how's the grid going to be able to support all this infrastructure that goes out? So we have a hydro plant. I tell this story. We have a hydro plant up at Tallulah Gorge. Anybody ever been to Tallulah Gorge? Okay, so we have a hydro plant up there. It was built in 1917. Okay, so in 1917, when it first went into service, the quote was that Atlanta now has enough power to supply them for eternity because of that plant. That plant can't serve. I mean, we have specific customers that use more than that plant can generate. Okay, so think about it from a technology standpoint. What all have we seen, right? I mean, we're nice and cool in here today, right? It's awful hot outside. So air conditioning, right? HVAC, cooking, all these new technologies have come online, and we've been able to keep up and adapt with it every time. We do something every 3 years. We file a integrated resource plan, and we do a 30-year focus. What are our needs going to be from a generation standpoint and a capacity standpoint? So we're doing a lot of planning, and so this is part of the plan. And as I said, EVs have been in part of the plan every 5 years, right? So we know that they're coming, and so we've got the capacity there. The question is it in the right spot? Right? You've got to get it to the right neighborhood, because you don't know necessarily which neighborhoods are going to need all of those chargers. And so that's really the biggest challenge from a utility standpoint, is understanding where all the chargers are going to go and then getting the power to the right spot. We've got it at a macro level, but getting it down to the micro level is going to be part of the challenge. And so that's really going to require a lot of communication between us and our customers. We need to know on the front end if we're working with a FedEx and they're going to put in, I don't know, 10 megawatts worth of chargers, right? Which is a lot of chargers, right? We've got to be able to plan. Do we have the substation in the right spot? Is it close? Do we have to upgrade the substation? Do we have to upgrade feeders? So we have to look at all those things. So being on the front end is what we want our customers to do, is say, hey, look, I'm thinking about doing this, because it could take years to build a new substation, right? So being on the front end with our customers and working with them and having that communication, making sure our charging companies and all the different businesses that come to Georgia, that they understand our processes and that they need to get their utility plugged in as quickly as possible as to what they're trying to do. The other thing that I like to do is let's take our example of the 450 kW chargers that are going to be part of the NEVI program, right? So when you start thinking about those, that's 600 kW worth of load at every one of these sites. Okay, that's like plugging in about 7 or 8 McDonald's. Okay, people don't understand the true gravity and the size and the power requirements. They think getting a charger is like plugging in a toaster, and it's not. Right? There is a lot of power that these things use that we have to be able to supply. So if you take an Amazon, right? When Amazon comes in, they want to electrify their entire fleet, and they want to put 40 megawatts worth of chargers in there, right? It's like building Kennesaw State University, okay? These things use a lot of power. And so helping our customers and making sure that they understand what we're going to have to do to be able to supply them, because it's not just sitting on a shelf, right? You just can't go in and buy it and say, okay, here's 40 megawatts, have it. You know, it's all that infrastructure has to be built out. And so that's really what our role is to try and work with our customers to make sure that they're getting the power that they need to be able to do that. And then understanding from helping our customers understand from a utility perspective what's going to be required to be able to get all these chargers to the right spots. I was having a conversation with the commissioner of GDOT one day, and we were in Athens, and I had to speak at an e-mobility conference there, and he was talking about that Georgia had been awarded something for their ferry, right? An electric ferry, right, for down here on the coast. And he was talking about it, which is great. And the only thing I can think about from a Georgia Power perspective is, how in the heck am I going to get power out to that little island on the other side, right? What does that look like, right? So that's where our mind always is trying to figure out, how do we get power there easier? Because what I don't want to have to do is build new lines, new distribution lines, and build out all this stuff. If I can get the chargers closer to where the power is and where the transformers are, that's a good thing. So a lot of engineering, a lot of design, and those things that we work on. So that's where our challenges come in, and making sure our customers that we're working with our customers and that we're all communicating well. And that's all I had. So I guess now we're going to get to take some questions, which I'm sure y'all have none, right? So, all right, thank you.
As Mr. Halliday mentioned, now is time for questions. So if anybody's got a question, please go to the microphone. And okay, Marco.
All right, I guess this one's for Mark Smith.
What software package or data are you using to determine the sites?
I actually don't know. Something here. I don't know data well. I'm not sure what package.
Any other questions? Kristen?
Okay, hi. So I think my question's mostly for Laura, but I'd open it up to anyone else who might have a comment, and maybe it's partially a comment. I'm curious to know more about kind of how your solar suitability model is treating, tree canopy and forest land, but also just want to comment that maybe there's an opportunity there to also go beyond avoiding like environmentally valuable resource areas, but also to look at potentially distressed areas like big kudzu fields and things that might exist within the right-of-way, and that could be a kind of way of killing two birds with one stone.
Thank you for that question. So what's great about the Esri ArcGIS Pro suite is that it has so much ability really to configure it with whatever we want for inclusion and exclusion. So I brought up just a few examples, but absolutely we can include protected lands, whether they're ecologically sensitive tree canopies. Even if there's not a specific layer, we do capture it under the digital surface model. So a lot of what we ask for with our partners is, what exactly is it that you want to include? So for example, a lot of folks, and we are not proponents of cutting tree canopies for solar, but some jurisdictions are cutting down the trees anyway for various reasons. So they may say, okay, well, this has, the tree canopy, but that's coming down anyway, or this stand needs to stay, so go ahead and get that, keep it in the exclusion. Or, the question might be, well, what about other types of brush that will still show up on the surface model? So there's a lot of nuance that we can, go into and deep dive into. And then, we can include or exclude whatever we want. So if we know where the invasive species are, we can go ahead and we can target in on those specific areas. Absolutely. If we have our utility layers, we can layer that on and we can put in a criteria saying, I want to be within 150 feet of, a distribution line or a substation. So we can get really granular with the layers and with the data and what we want to include or exclude. It's really just how good is the data and, and what you want to do with it. But there's a lot of flexibility, so it makes it really fun.
Hi, Dan Dobry with Croy. People run out of gas. Are the Champ and the Hero trucks going to become mobile charging stations? And then my second question would be, what's the implication for the expansion of the number of power plants within the state in order to provide enough electricity as the market expands?
I think I helped you with the first question. Is hey, that's all on you there. So the first one, I think we are looking at models for mobile charging, specifically as we talk about our evacuation routes. So there are a couple of vendors out there that are helping us understand. And one of the things that we met that was a concern for the commissioner was, are we just going to put these stations there that won't be used and then will only be used in a storm that happens once a year when everyone comes up from Florida, use all the power there and go into Atlanta? And so one of the things that we are looking at as we're prioritizing our evacuation routes, which I think will help when we look at the Champs and Heroes, is, how do we effectively use mobile charging, and, how do we convince the federal government that that should be compliant for this program at least, and hopefully that sets the tone for the future.
So, so I mentioned briefly the integrated resource plan that we look at, and what that does is, again, every 3 years we put together a comprehensive look for a 30-year plan on what we're going to need from a generation standpoint. And we've been doing that for years, right? So we're required to make sure we have at least enough excess capacity to be able to serve. If all the load got plugged in at one time, would we be able to serve it? And so we're required to basically manage that and keep a reserve so that, you know, things come online that we're not aware of or whatever the case may be. But so there is a plan in place to make sure that we've got the capacity needed to be able to serve these chargers and everything that comes on. You know, and as part of that integrated resource plan, we work with the Public Service Commission and they'll approve it when we go through there. But we'll look at hiring our coal plants, which is something that we've been doing a lot. And then if we need to add new natural gas, we need to convert those coal plants to natural gas, we can do that. And then, of course, the hope is that our 2 nuclear plants come online, hopefully by the end of this year and the other one next. I think the most recent. Hopefully those will be online soon as well. So, so it really just comes down to planning is the biggest part of that. I hope that answers.
Still have time for. I'm Andrew with Arcadis. This is more a question for Glenn and might be showing just my ignorance. But you know, I've seen people talk about kind of when you move from gasoline to then plugging into a power grid that's still kind of coal powered, kind of what that difference is. I'm wondering if you can explain for us kind of at the consumer level, like if somebody's just wanting to switch to an electric vehicle, like how much greener or what's that difference in like carbon footprint, already acknowledging, you know, you've noted nuclear, hydro, natural gas, like with our current power grid share, I guess, like what does that look like?
Yeah, so you're right. It's when you go to electric and you get rid of gas or whatnot, you're not going to be, you know, 100% clean because you are still burning, you know, natural gas. Coal is becoming much less common. We used to have a pretty good mix of fuels, but we've become more heavily dominant on natural gas versus coal now. And then the nuclear plants will come on. We've got some hydro. We've got a lot of solar. We're looking at wind. And so we're looking at different renewable technologies to be able to continue to diversify our generation fleet and try to do it as clean as possible, right? So as a company, we're trying to bring our carbonization down too from that standpoint. But to your point, you are right. It's going to lessen the carbon footprint to go from gas to electric, but there's still going to be a part of it that's out there. And, you know, as a company, we're working to try and, you know, improve our carbon footprint as well. So I don't know if that completely answered your question, but hopefully it got you at least part of the way there.
Hey, Ron Konezovich with GDOT. Laura, I was real interested in the chargers within the pavement and concrete. Can you speak on how those might deteriorate over time and if they're able to be maintained or have to be fully replaced?
Yeah, so the loops that the Aspire Center is working on and that Electrion puts in, those projects, they're actually placed underneath the asphalt or the concrete. And so just like any other, you know, electrical equipment, their lifespan is 30, 40 years guaranteed. And so the concern really isn't with the deterioration of that. The concern will be with the operation and maintenance of the roadway, right? So your roadway is still going to get potholes and will still need to be maintained, and it will get, you know, damaged like it does. And so now that you have this electrical infrastructure in it, there will have to be a bit of a change with how you maintain it because you can't just start digging it out, right? So that is going to be part of the project. So, making sure that those locations are tracked and maintained appropriately. And that is something, those are standards that the Aspire Center is working on right now. So, the consortium and the Aspire Center is a National Science Foundation engineering research center. So they've been funded by the federal government to advance this technology and really, push it towards broad commercialization so that we can have ubiquitous dynamic wireless charging across the country. And so they're working on the different standards. The first one that has already been put into place, of course, is safety. And so the operation and maintenance and all of these other standards on what it actually looks like when you roll it out, those are all being worked on right now for the most appropriate, way to maintain them and make sure that the workforce is trained appropriately on how to maintain them, and all of the above. So yes, definitely concerns. Not so much with the equipment deteriorating, but with the maintenance of the transportation asset.
Hello, this is Matt D'Angelo with Gresham Smith. Laura, this is probably a question to you. I was really interested in the GeoTab results and findings, and that seems to be a national question that we really need to get our arms around. Are you aware of any efforts to kind of look at that question from the perspective of interstate commerce?
So we are looking to expand with GeoTab, and we are actually in negotiation with them right now on what that expanded partnership looks like beyond just the pilot projects. So, our home state, of course, is Georgia. So we are working hard to get all of the interstates and other freight routes mapped in Georgia, so that we can then pass that along to our partners here. And then the other piece with GeoTab is, working on, allowing them to help our other transportation agency partners get access to that data, so that they can do their own long-term planning. So I'm not aware of the broader, nationwide planning and analysis necessarily, but I think taking that same analysis and applying it across the country, for our different DOTs so that they can look at it in their long-range plans as well.
This is one with Atkins. I'm very interested about the solar panel. Looking in the future, once we migrate more electricity into solar panel, one of the things always in our mind is there any discussion going on? There's a lifespan with solar panel, right? So how do we recycle those solar panel? That's probably for Laura or for Glenn. Is there anything being discussed, looking in the future to make everything more clean as possible? Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, recycling is a real concern. So not just for solar panels, but also for EV batteries. The tires. So we know that tires, we're going to start running through more and more tires with EVs, probably about twice as fast. So, circularity is a really big concern for all of these, clean, renewable EVs, all of this new technology. We have to start thinking about circularity right now. And, the equipment, the solar panels, they do last, well, they're warranted about 30 years, right? But they can last up to 50. But, they degrade as they go down. And there are some efforts to recycle and to reuse, but I actually don't think that there is like the silver bullet right now. This is something that we are going to have to start innovating, not just for solar panels, but for batteries, for tires.
So yeah, the recycling piece is real, right? Particularly when you start thinking about it from just a battery standpoint, EV batteries. And, we're doing, and there's a lot of companies doing second life battery research, right? because as a battery in a vehicle degrades, right, while it may not power your vehicle anymore, it's still got a useful life. So what can you do with it? Could you take that battery out and put it in your garage and have it be a backup power supply for your house, right? Because it's got enough power to be able to do that. It just can't take the daily grind of a car, right? So, but could it be used in a home? So there's a lot of research going on right now around what you can do with these technologies from a second life standpoint. And so I think what you'll see today is in the EV world is that what it looks like today is going to be vastly different in 5 years because the technology is here. And I'm going to show my age, right? But, you know, if you remember the whole beta VHS kind of thing, right? So if you remember those, right, there were different technologies and one's going to win. I think you'll see different technologies and options come, and eventually one's going to win on what we do with some of these technologies from that standpoint. So I think there's a lot of things to happen in the market. And eventually, you know, there's a lot of smart people who are working on these types of things, and there'll be some good innovations to be able to reuse these things in an effective manner.
One real quick question, and it could be Georgia Power or GDOT. Okay, I got an electric vehicle, I need a charge. I pull into McDonald's or somebody and get a quick charge. What's that going to cost me?
That's probably mine. So honestly, God, I hate to use the word it depends, right? But it depends. You know, typically what's going to happen if you go into a McDonald's and a McDonald's has the charger and they own the charger and they're providing it, you know, they could provide it as an amenity to you and you don't pay anything, right? It could be that they set the pricing, right? And so typically the way most of them work is about 25 cents a minute for those big DC fast chargers. Is about the going rate right now. Could be 30, but it's going to be up to those companies to set those prices, because in the state of Georgia, you can't, as somebody who buys electricity from Georgia Power, you can't turn around and resell electricity. So they can't sell it by the kilowatt hour. You may see some things change when some of the with some of the legislative meetings that are coming out. You know, to where particularly convenience stores and whatnot want to be able to sell by the kilowatt hour. So you may start seeing some of that come in, but right now, and I'm gonna give y'all, I'll give y'all a quick. I don't have an electric vehicle, but I drove one down here. One of our company ones had to stop in Metter to charge, right? And so the way it worked out is I plugged in. I had 50 miles left. Just to give everybody kind of a feel for this, I had 50 miles left on my battery. I stopped in Metter. I charged. It took me 14 minutes to get to 237 miles. So I added 187 miles worth of range in that 14 minutes. And it cost me about $13 to charge. So I did some quick math in my head. So to get 187 miles on a car that gets an average of 20 miles to the gallon, I would have needed about 8 or 9 gallons of gas. Quick math, it would have cost me about $40 in gas for the same that I just paid $13 for. So there's definitely a cost difference and a savings from that standpoint. But I would say right now, the way the market works is right now it's probably about 25 or 30 cents a minute for those big DC fast chargers. If you're talking about home charging, right, if you buy one and put it at your house, what are you going to pay? I would tell you that we're always looking at our rates and our rate structures, and we do have an EV rate. And what it's designed to do is help you what it's trying to get you to do is charge overnight between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. because that's when we have the most capacity available on our system. And that rate, I believe during that time, you pay cents, pennies. I mean, it's very, very low there. As long as you charge during those times, you can get really good cost to be able to charge your vehicle. So, thank you.
Yes, this is Raul with GDOT. I have a question just as somebody who lives currently in like an apartment home. what kind of infrastructure can we expect in the future so that we don't have to take trips away from home in order to charge and things like that for planning?
Feels like a me question too. So part of our Make Ready program that I referenced, we have worked with a number of multifamily apartment and condo owners. I would say 30% of all the projects that we've done are in the multifamily market. There are challenges with the multifamily market and what it should look like, because particularly like a condo association, right? You go in there and wire for all 200 parking spots. There's a lot of cost there, right? I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to do that. Or if you're in an apartment complex, can you block off 10, 12 chargers, put in some level 2s for people to park overnight, maybe put in a DC fast charger to be able to, get a 15-minute charge quickly, and then have all the homeowners have access to that, right? So they don't have to leave the property, but they may have to plan, right? After work, I got to stop in there and plug my car in for a couple hours, so I have enough. So I think that multifamily homeowner associations and those companies that manage those properties are going to have to start thinking about how they're going to meet the need of their customers. What I'm starting to lean towards is don't try to do every space, because it's not going to be cost prohibitive. If you can put in what I'll call a charging farm, if you will, on your property and do, 10 or 12 spaces, put a DC fast charger in, typically it will cover the needs of your folks, right? Because, the cars today, they can hold, 270, 300 miles. A lot of them can. And a lot of people don't need to charge every day. So they could do it every other day. And so you don't have to have one in every space. So I think what it's going to come down to is the homeowner associations and the management companies that manage those are going to have to come up with an EV charging plan. And that's what my team is designed to do, is help those homeowners associations do that. So I would tell you it's in progress, but it's happening. It's just, there's a lot of them out there. So. Glad I could help.
Last one. Hopefully it's quick. Sean Green, I'm the guy with the hat. What is the culture associated with the DC rapid charge? I mean, is there a, let's say, a self-awareness that if you need 15 minutes, you only stay there 15 minutes, as opposed to, the line of people behind you that are waiting to get at that 15-minute charge? Or is anybody looking to start that sociology experiment?
No, there is a need for the culture for EV drivers. Most of the EV drivers kind of understand. So I would say they don't typically plug in and leave it there all day at a DC fast charger. There are some companies out there where you can set the pricing of your charger up, where I mentioned it was 25 cents a minute. So it might be 25 cents a minute up to the first hour. And then after that, it's $25 a minute, right? And so you can set the pricing to discourage somebody from sitting there all day and charging their car and just walking away and leaving it for 8 hours, right? So there are some strategies around there, but there's a risk, right? I mean, there is a culture. I would say most EV drivers are fairly courteous from that standpoint, because they don't want to be the ones that get caught in that either, right? So, but to your point, I think it is going to take a culture shift and a mindset shift of people, right? So, when I drove down here, it's the first time I've taken a trip. I mean, I've driven an electric car, but it's the first time I've taken a trip where I had to really stop and think about charging. And I will tell you, I was concerned. I was like, oh gosh, is this going to work? What am I going to do? And it was easy as could be. And the car popped up and it said, to continue your trip, you need 14 minutes worth of a charge and you'll have plenty to get there. Okay, great. So I plugged in for 14 minutes and got everything I needed to finish my trip. And it was real easy. And the time I was there, I pulled in, and there's probably 6 stations at this place. And All but one were full, and I mean, people were just coming and going from them. Excuse me. So I don't think it's that. I think the real risk is when you've got one of those level 2 chargers. If somebody just plugging in all day and leaving their vehicle there, that's the risk. I don't think it happens on the DC fast chargers. Yep.
Okay, I think that gets us to the break. The next session, it looks like,